Wrestling fans are always searching for someone new, someone to shake things up and make things more exciting. That's why it's always a great moment then whenever a rising star gets elevated to that next level and reaches the top of the card. Even better when it happens to someone who's, by all accounts, one of the most well-liked people both behind the scenes and on screen. Yes, finally, after all these years, Big E has become the top dog on Raw, and it couldn't have happened to anyone more deserving. But how did he get to this point? Well, join us today as we take a deep dive into his entire career journey so far in Feel the Power! The Big E Story. Ettore Ewan was born on March 1, 1986 in Tampa, Florida, to parents Ettore and Margaret, and growing up, he would quickly find a passion in the sports world while studying at Wharton High School. Amongst the endeavors he would pursue here would be amateur wrestling, which Ettore developed so much skill in that he would eventually win a state championship and even be named Hillsborough County's Iron Man of the Year at one point. And after that, he moved on to the University of Iowa, where he picked up football too, playing as a defensive lineman for the Hawkeyes and making his own stamp there until injuries eventually forced him to reconsider his direction. This direction, as it turned out, would see him get introduced to the world of professional wrestling by a friend of Jim Ross, who suggested that, given Ettore's physical attributes and experience as an amateur, he should give WWE a shot, with this mutual friend then following that up by getting in touch with the WWE official and arranging for him to have a tryout with Florida Championship Wrestling, the company's developmental brand at that time. And it was here, starting in 2009, that the Tampa native would quickly find himself to be a natural in the ring, completing his training in just a few short months, then going on to make his debut in December of that year, now under the new name of Big E Langston. But of course, that wasn't all he was doing at this point, as Ettore had become equally as focused on succeeding in the world of powerlifting as well, with WWE being only too happy to let him carry out this dual role with the hopes that he would find success there, and thus bring more legitimacy to his in-ring character. And success he most certainly did find, as it happened, so much so that he would end up going on to compete in the first ever USA powerlifting meet in July of 2010 at that year's United States Open Championships, finishing first and breaking all 4 Florida state records in the 275-pound class in the process. And if that wasn't enough, he then went on to Scranton, Pennsylvania the next year too, where he would win the USAPL Raw Nationals, breaking national records in the deadlift and total categories after he lifted 799 pounds and 2,039 pounds respectively. Satisfied with this success under his belt then, he returned to FCW in May of 2011, where he would team with Calvin Reigns to become the FCW Florida Tag Team Champions after beating the duo of Richie Steamboat and Seth Rollins. Not long after that, and his star would continue to grow when he pinned main roster talent Cesaro at a WrestleMania Access event in April of the following year. It seemed obvious then for all to see by that point that there were big things in the future of the rookie, and so it came as little surprise to anyone when, around this time, he began setting his attentions on the next step up the ladder, that being the NXT title. Yes, by 2012, FCW had been rebranded as NXT, and it was on this brand that Big E would go on a lengthy winning streak after having made his formal debut there on August 1st of that year. So confident did he become in his ability to rack up victories at a certain point, he would even bring back an old King Kong Bundy gimmick when he started instructing the referee to count to 5 rather than 3, signaling that he hadn't just pinned his opponents, he had thoroughly demolished them. Soon following this, Big E would fall under the eye of Vicky Guerrero, who began trying to court him with the intention of becoming his manager, but ever the babyface, Langston ended up rejecting these offers, this leading to the wife of the late Eddie putting a bounty on his head, sending out numerous jobbers in the weeks that followed to take him out. Of course, all of these were quickly sent packing, and not long after that, the rookie would finally get his shot at the brand's top prize when he began a feud with The Shield towards the end of that year. This all eventually leading to him getting a one-on-one title match against the NXT Champion Seth Rollins on the January 9th, 2013 episode of the show. And it was on that night where, after pinning the Architect, Langston would be able to call himself a world champion for the first time in his career as he held the belt aloft, with him proving to be a fighting one after that, as he racked up a string of successful defenses against the likes of Corey Graves, Brad Maddox, and Damian Sandow. But nothing good can last forever though, and so after losing his gold to Bo Dallas in June of that year, Big E would be forced to regroup, with him now deciding that there was nothing more the Black and Yellow brand could offer him, as he was instead moved up to the main roster, where he would immediately turn heel and become aligned with both Dolph Ziggler and AJ Lee. And as a trio, Langston, Ziggler, and Lee became the scourge of Raw over the next few months, as they immediately got thrust into a main event program when they set their sights on taking out John Cena. Of course, at this point, Big E primarily acted as the enforcer of the group and rarely got in the ring himself. But that said, whenever he did, he would prove he was just as much of a threat as anyone else on the roster, with him even picking up a win over Daniel Bryan on the April 8, 2013 episode of the Red Brands show. Because of this then, after Dolph suffered a concussion a month later and had to vacate his World Heavyweight title as a result, his protege would get a chance to win it himself when he took part in a best-of-5 series with Alberto Del Rio to determine the new champion in the weeks that followed. Unfortunately though, it would not be his time quite yet, and, to rub salt in the wound, things only got worse when, that July, Ziggler ended his on-screen relationship with AJ, this severing the group as Big E from there continued to stand by the side of the Divas Champion as they went on to have a feud against their former friend and Caitlyn in the weeks after this, all of it leading up to a big blow-off mixed tag match at that year's SummerSlam pay-per-view. After that was done then, Langston turned face and began distancing himself from Lee as he instead joined forces with CM Punk to take on Curtis Axel and Ryback, this being after their advocate Paul Heyman had made disparaging remarks about the Florida native being nothing more than a rookie. This feud would ultimately see him get a pinfall over Axel on the October 21st episode of Raw, putting him in line for a shot at the heel's Intercontinental title the next month. And on that night, when his shot finally came, Big E would become a champion once again when he pinned his opponent to take home his first gold while on the main roster. After that, he retained in the rematch at November 24th Survivor Series, and then went on to successfully defend against a host of challengers such as Damian Sandow and Jack Swagger as 2013 turned to 2014. In fact, by the end of this reign, he would have held the belt for 167 days, a feat which was pretty impressive given the reputation that mid-card titles in WWE had for bouncing around from person to person at that point. But even when he did lose the belt, it was still obvious to anyone paying attention at this point that Vince McMahon saw big things in Langston's future. That was why he had him drop his surname around this time, with him from there on in just being known as Big E. Yes, it's one of the boss's stranger quirks of having people shorten their names like that, but it did prove that he was paying attention to what the Tampa native was doing, and so this could only mean positive things for his rise up the card. And that rise continued as he next got into a prominent program with Rusev, then from there, entered the Intercontinental title picture once again. That said, it wouldn't be until later that year that he would reach the next level entirely, as it was then that a new day would rise on the promotion and a new stable would be born. Of course, you all know what's coming next. In the summer of 2014, Big E would begin teaming up with Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, with the trio soon christening themselves as the New Day, a collective of happy-go-lucky superstars who just wanted to have some fun and spread some positivity. Initially, however, this didn't go down well with fans, who saw the whole thing as being far too cheesy and garish to take seriously. It didn't help either at this point that the personalities of all three men weren't really being given a chance to come through either, and they were instead being expected to regurgitate some truly terrible scripted material, this only serving to draw even more boos from the audience. So, in an attempt to salvage the gimmick, WWE decided to turn them heel come April of the following year, with this seeing the New Day finally be able to let out some of their real selves as the group morphed into something closer to what they are today, a pop culture reference heavy party held between three friends. And with this change quickly came renewed fan support for Big E, Kofi, and Xavier, as the boos gradually began getting drowned out in favor of cheers in the months that followed. Before they would formally turn face, however, they would tease audiences for a while, letting them want it all the more as the New Day won their first of many tag team titles at that year's Extreme Rules pay-per-view, with them from there using the Freebird rule that allowed all three to defend the belts as they fended off a number of challengers such as the Primetime Players, the Ascension, and the Lucha Dragons. Even when they briefly lost the gold to the former team at June 15, 2015's Money in the Bank pay-per-view, they would be able to regain them just 2 months later, proving without a shadow of a doubt that they were the top team in the division. After that, They fended off legendary unit the Dudley Boys before starting what has gone on to, in many ways, become their defining feud as they had a match with the Usos at December's Tables, Ladders, and Chairs. And that night, the two teams had a stellar effort, this being the first of many they would put on together, as in the years to come, they would have some of the best tag matches seen in WWE since the heights of the Attitude Era some 14 years previous. It was also around this time that the New Day would finally cave in to fan demand and formally turn babyface, with them from there on in becoming one of the most beloved acts on the roster, one which managed to thread the needle of being popular not only with adult men, but with women and children too. So popular would they become, in fact, that they would end up routinely being one of the company's highest merch sellers, challenging the likes of John Cena, Roman Reigns, and Becky Lynch for that top spot in the years that followed, making so much money and getting so over that they would be one of the very few examples of a team who wouldn't get split up after a year or so together, with this only serving to make their bond with fans stronger, as everyone could just feel how close all three men were. And one of the ways fans could see this, aside from their on-screen activities, was in their extracurricular activities too, whether it be on Xavier Woods' Up Up Down Down YouTube gaming channel or their Feel the Power podcast. They were able to let their personalities shine using every avenue available to them and even drawing in some new fans in the form of young Gen Z gamers and YouTubers in the process. Back in the ring, however, their focus would remain the same: pick up wins everywhere they went. And this was something they did often, as they had matches against the League of Nations, the Vaudevillains, and the Good Brothers in the months that followed, coming out on top in each one and continuing their reign as tag team champions as a result. After beating everyone SmackDown had to offer, in fact, they would eventually be moved over to Raw in July of 2016 as part of that year's draft, with them breaking the record for the longest-running tag champs at 332 days just 3 days after this. But because they'd reached this milestone didn't mean they were ready to give them up quite yet, and so, over the next few months, they would fend off the Good Brothers once more, all before taking on a new set of challengers in the form of The Bar. Despite each team's best efforts though, neither seemed to be able to crack the code of how to beat the champions. Even when main event single stars such as Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens, or Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins tried coming together to topple them, they were easily defeated, as the New Day kept going, looking at this point like they were going to keep a hold of the titles forever. But unfortunately, all good things must come to an end eventually, and so it was that at December 18th, 2016's Roadblock end-of-the-line pay-per-view, it would be The Bar who would finally best the trio, ending their record-smashing reign at 483 days. From there then, the New Day took something of a back seat for the next couple of months as they let other teams take the spotlight while they acted as the hosts for WrestleMania 33. Come the summer of 2017, though, they would be ready to re-enter the title picture after having been drafted over to SmackDown, with them from there kickstarting their feud with the Usos and even going on to beat them for the SmackDown Tag Team titles at July 23rd's Battleground pay-per-view. Following this, the two teams would spend the rest of the year and well into the next trading the belts back and forth with each other, all while having some of the best tag team matches of their generation as they did. If you only have time to watch one of these, go back and check out their Hell in a Cell encounter at that year's titular pay-per-view. It's the best thing to happen to the WWE Tag Division since TLC 2. Come the end of the program, though, it would be the Bludgeon Brothers who ended up taking the belts away from both of them. Not that this slowed down Big E and his teammates, though, because they would just move on to a feud with the Monster Duo during the summer of 2018. One which ended with them regaining their lost gold on the August 21st episode of SmackDown. This starting their third reign with the Blue Brand's belts. After that run was over, however, the quest to become tag champions again would fall to the back burner for a while when KofiMania caught fire, and Kofi Kingston suddenly became the second coming of Daniel Bryan, a grassroots babyface sensation on the verge of challenging for the WWE title at WrestleMania, despite years of having been rooted in the mid-card. At this point, there were many whispers that, as was the tradition with all WWE tag teams, this would see the beginning of the end for the New Day, as the boss's standard playbook dictated that if Kingston was indeed moving up to the main event picture, he couldn't be saddled as a tag team wrestler anymore. Of course, the most WWE solution to this would have been to turn either Big E or Xavier Woods heel then, but in a refreshing change of pace, this didn't happen. Instead, both men showed the power of friendship and positivity as they stuck by their teammate, even helping him to get his eventual title match when they lasted the distance during a gauntlet match on the March 27, 2019 episode of SmackDown. And when Kofi eventually did win the top prize that night, both Big E and Xavier were right there by his side to celebrate with him, proving once and for all that the New Day was a unit nothing could come between. But of course, with the new champion now going on something of a singles run, albeit while still being aligned with his teammates, this left the other two New Day members to go it alone in the tag division for a while, as they earned yet another shot at the SmackDown Tag Team Gold at July 14, 2019's Extreme Rules, eventually going on to beat Daniel Bryan and Eric Rowan on that night to start their fourth reign. By now, however, given that the company had been able to successfully make a champion out of Kofi Kingston, there were increased calls for Big E to get his chance too. Many had seen him as a breakout star in waiting for years by this point, in fact, and so, when he spent the next 12 months still firmly rooted in the tag team division, a lot of fans were disappointed. Clearly, WWE heard this though, because on the July 24, 2020 episode of SmackDown, Kofi announced that he would be forced to take 6 weeks out due to an injury and, as Xavier was also injured at this point, he gave Big E his blessing to finally go on that long-awaited singles run. From there, the Florida boy would start a feud with Sheamus that would see him defeat the Irishman on multiple occasions, all before he was shockingly separated from his New Day brothers during that year's draft, when Kingston and Woods were moved over to Raw. At the time, this left many with mixed feelings, as it appeared to signify that both WWE were being serious about Big E's singles push, while also marking the end of one of the company's best acts. Thankfully then, fans needn't have worried because they ended up getting the best of both worlds. Yes, while they weren't on TV together every week anymore, the New Day made it clear that they were still very much a unit, and they would continue to appear together whenever pay-per-view nights came and both brands joined forces temporarily. That said, whenever Fridays came, it would be the Big E show, as he continued to build momentum with his singles run. On the Christmas Day edition of the show that year, in fact, he would beat Sami Zayn in a lumberjack match to win the Intercontinental title, a title he would go on to hold for the next 3 months as he proved to be one of the shining stars of the Blue brand during the pandemic era. Still, it felt that Vince McMahon was cautious about fully pulling the trigger on him, a decision which, in hindsight, probably had a lot to do with him wanting to wait until fans returned, because at July 18, 2021's Money in the Bank, the first WWE pay-per-view in a year and a half to feature a return to full crowds, Big E would win that event's titular ladder match to earn himself a shot at the WWE title any time of his choosing over the next 12 months. Finally then, it seemed like the company were running with the Tampa Boy, and feeling this change in the air, fans started getting excited as they awaited the moment when he would finally cash in. What they probably didn't expect though was that, as a SmackDown wrestler, it would be Raw where he would cash in, and that, not just that, but he would announce it ahead of time. Yes, on the September 10th, 2021 episode of SmackDown, Big E teased that he would be on Raw the following week, this laying the groundwork for him to go on social media in the days that followed this, confirming that he would indeed be cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase on the winner of the WWE title match that night, featuring Bobby Lashley and Randy Orton. And true to his word, after Lashley came out the victor at the end of the show, Big E's music would hit as he from there ran down to the ring and staked his claim to the gold. Just a couple of minutes later, and there was a new champion in town as Big E held the belt above his head, with Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods coming down to celebrate with him in a scene that mirrored the latter's big moment at WrestleMania 35. Where things go from here remain to be seen, but as it stands just now, Raw feels exciting for the first time in a long time, with a brand new main eventer having been made in Big E, one who fans actually want to get behind and see succeed. If the company has any sense then, the new champ will have a good run with the title as he continues to establish himself as a top guy on Raw. Of course, with the New Day now all being on the same brand again, we're sure there'll be a lot of fun to come with them too, but we hope that this doesn't overshadow his chance to be a single star in his own merits, because WWE need new top stars, and there are few better selections for that role than Big E. Well guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.